Katie's hands trembled as she stepped off the plane in Seoul, clutching her son's hand tighter than she should. For years ago, she'd fled this city with a secret growing inside her and a lie on her lips, a lie that saved her life but destroyed the man she loved. Now, as she walked through the airport, she didn't know that across the city, in a penthouse wrapped in shadows, Taemin was staring at a photograph his security team had just delivered. A photograph of her. And beside her, a little boy with his eyes. His chest tightened with a rage so fierce it could burn down kingdoms, but underneath it, something far more dangerous stirred: hope. Katie thought she could slip in and out of Seoul unnoticed, say goodbye to her dying mother, and disappear again. She had no idea that within 48 hours, she'd be standing face to face with the father of her child, and the deadly truth she'd been hiding would threaten to destroy them all. Before we dive into Katie and Taemin's story, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Drop a like if you're ready for this emotional roller coaster. Now let's begin. Katie hadn't expected Seoul to feel like coming home, but the moment she saw the city lights twinkling against the night sky, her heart betrayed her with a painful flutter of recognition. For years had passed since she'd walked these streets, since she'd felt Taemin's arms around her, since she'd whispered that devastating lie and disappeared into the darkness. Now, holding 3-year-old Juno's hand as they collected their luggage, she reminded herself why she'd come back. Her mother was dying, and some goodbyes couldn't be avoided, no matter how dangerous the return. Juno tugged at her sleeve, his dark eyes, so heartbreakingly similar to his father's, wide with curiosity about this new place, and Katie's chest tightened with the weight of all the secrets she carried. What Katie didn't know was that Taemin's security network had flagged her passport the moment she'd landed. In his office overlooking the Han River, Taemin stood frozen, staring at the alert on his phone, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. For 4 years, he convinced himself he'd moved on, that the woman who'd shattered his heart meant nothing anymore. But seeing her name, knowing she was breathing the same air, walking the same streets, it awakened something savage and desperate inside him. His assistant, Minjun, watched nervously as Taemin's knuckles turned white around his phone. "Should I arrange a meeting, sir?" Minjun asked carefully. Taemin's voice was dangerously soft when he finally spoke. "No. Find out where she's staying, who she's with, and why she's here. And Minjun, make sure she doesn't leave Seoul until I decide she can." What will happen when Taemin discovers the truth about Juno? Katie's mother looked so small in the hospital bed, a fraction of the vibrant woman who had retired to Seoul 5 years ago to teach English and embrace adventure. "My baby girl," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as she reached for Katie's face. "And my beautiful grandson." Juno climbed carefully onto the bed, and Katie's heart broke watching her mother hold the child she'd only seen in secret photos and video calls. They talked about everything except the truth. The real reason Katie had fled Seoul, the powerful man whose son sat between them, the danger that still lurked in the shadows. When her mother finally drifted to sleep, Katie kissed her forehead and made a silent promise. She'd stay until the end, no matter the cost, even if it meant facing the man who still owned pieces of her shattered heart. Taemin read the report 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. Katie was in Seoul for her mother. The woman was in hospice with weeks, maybe days left. He should have felt nothing, should have let her grieve and leave in peace. But the photographs his team had taken at the airport told a different story. The little boy holding Katie's hand had his eyes, his nose, the same stubborn set to his jaw that Taemin saw in the mirror every morning. His hands shook as he zoomed in on the child's face, and something cracked open inside his chest. For years of carefully constructed walls crumbling in an instant. "Her hotel," he said to Minjun, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't name. "I want her room number, and I want a car ready in 10 minutes. Minjun hesitated. "Sir, perhaps you should wait until morning, until you're..." Taemin's eyes blazed with something between fury and anguish. "That woman has been hiding my son from me. Morning can wait. I can't." Taemin is coming for answers, and Katie has nowhere to run. What will happen when they finally come face to face? Katie had just tucked Juno into bed when the knock came. Soft but commanding, the kind of knock that said the person on the other side wouldn't be ignored. Her blood turned to ice because somehow she knew. Even before she looked through the peephole and saw him standing there in an all-black suit, hands in his pockets, jaw tight with barely controlled emotion, she knew. Taemin, for years, had made him even more devastating, his shoulders broader, his face harder. But those eyes, God, those eyes still held the same intensity that had made her fall in love with him. Her hand hovered over the door handle, every instinct screaming at her to run, to wake Juno and escape through the fire exit. But her mother's face flashed in her mind, and she knew running would only make things worse. Taking a shaky breath, Katie opened the door, and the moment their eyes met, the air between them crackled with for years of hurt, longing, and unspoken truths. "Hello, Katie," Tamien said, his voice dangerously soft as he stepped forward, forcing her to back into the room. He closed the door behind him with a quiet click that sounded like a prison cell locking. For years of silence, and you thought you could just slip back into my city without me knowing." His eyes roamed over her face, drinking in every detail. The way she'd cut her hair shorter, the new wariness in her eyes, the way she positioned herself between him and the bedroom where his son slept. Because he knew. The DNA test wouldn't be necessary. Every instinct in his body recognized that child as his. Katie's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Tamien, I can explain." "Explain?" He laughed, but it was a sound without humor, raw and broken. "You disappeared like smoke. You left me a note saying I was a mistake, that you never loved me, and now you're back with a child who has my face. So please, Katie, explain. Explain how you could keep my son from me. Explain how you could let me believe you never cared when—" His voice cracked, and he turned away, his shoulders rigid with the effort of holding himself together. The truth is about to spill out, but will it bring them together or tear them apart forever? Katie's eyes filled with tears she'd held back for 4 years, and before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out in a desperate whisper. "I left because I loved you, Tamien. I left because staying would have gotten me killed, and our baby with me." The confession hung in the air like shattered glass, and she watched his back stiffen, watched his hands clench into fists at his sides. She told him everything, about discovering the pregnancy, about overhearing Mr. Choi's true identity as an undercover agent, about the warning that she'd become collateral damage in a war she never signed up for. "Choi told me that your enemies were closing in, that they'd use me to destroy you. He said even you might have to choose your empire over me to survive. So I made the choice for you. I broke your heart to save all our lives." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she wrapped her arms around herself, feeling more vulnerable than she'd ever felt. "Every day for 4 years, I've looked at our son and seen your face. Every day, I've died a little inside knowing what I took from you. But I'd do it again, Tamien. I'd break both our hearts 1,000 times to keep Juno safe." Tamien turned slowly, and Katie gasped at what she saw in his face. Not the anger she expected, but anguish so deep it made her chest ache. "You should have trusted me," he said, his voice breaking as he crossed the room in 3 strides and cupped her face in his hands, his touch achingly gentle despite the storm in his eyes. "You should have let me protect both of you. Instead, I've spent 4 years half alive, convincing myself I hated you when every night I dreamed of holding you again." His thumb brushed away her tears, and the tenderness in the gesture nearly destroyed her. Katie's hands came up to grip his wrists, needing to hold onto something solid before she shattered completely. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Tamien's forehead dropped to rest against hers, and they stood there breathing the same air, for years of pain and love swirling between them. "I have a son," he murmured, wonder creeping into his voice. "We have a son." But before Katie could respond, a small voice came from the bedroom doorway. "Mommy, who is that man?" Juno stood there rubbing his eyes, and Katie's heart stopped as father and son looked at each other for the very first time. The moment of truth has arrived. How will Tamien react to meeting his son face to face? Will Juno accept this stranger as his father? Tamien's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the little boy in the doorway. His son, his flesh and blood, real and perfect and more beautiful than any dream he'd ever had. Juno looked between his mother and this tall stranger with curious eyes, clutching a stuffed elephant against his chest. Katie moved first, kneeling down to pull Juno close, her voice gentle despite the panic flooding her veins. "Baby, this is an old friend of Mommy's. His name is Tamien." But Juno's sharp eyes, those eyes he'd inherited from his father, studied Tamien with an intensity that made Katie's heart race. "You look like me," Juno said matter-of-factly, tilting his head. "Do you have the same birthday as me too?" The innocent question hit Tamien like a physical blow, and he had to blink back the sudden burning in his eyes. He slowly crouched down to Juno's level, maintaining a respectful distance even though every fiber of his being screamed to pull this child into his arms and never let go. "Your mommy's right, I'm an old friend," Tamien said softly, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't quite hide. "And you're absolutely right, we do look alike. That's pretty cool, isn't it?" Juno nodded seriously, then surprised everyone by walking right up to Tamien and touching his face with one small hand. "You have sad eyes like mommy sometimes. Are you sad too?" The question was so pure, so devastatingly innocent, that Tamien had to close his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. "I was sad," he admitted, glancing up at Katie, who stood frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth. "But I think maybe I don't have to be sad anymore." Juno seemed to consider this, then held out his stuffed elephant. "You can hold Mr. Trunk. He makes people feel better." As Tamien's large, powerful hands that had built an empire and made grown men tremble, gently accepted the worn stuffed animal from his son, Katie felt something inside her chest crack wide open. This was the moment she'd been terrified of for 4 years, and it was more beautiful and heartbreaking than anything she could have imagined. A fragile connection has been made, but the danger Katie fled from is still lurking. Will this moment of peace last, or is something sinister about to tear this new family apart? After Juno finally fell back asleep, with Tamien sitting by his bedside, stroking his hair with a tenderness that made Katie's heart ache, they stood together on the small hotel balcony, the sole night alive with lights and possibilities. "I want him to know I'm his father," Tamien said quietly, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I want you both in my life, Katie. I want to make up for every moment I've missed, his first word, his first steps, every bedtime story I should have read." Katie felt tears slide down her cheeks because she wanted that too, wanted it so desperately it scared her. But wanting and having were two different things when you loved a man who lived in the shadows. "The danger that made me leave," she whispered. "Is it gone? Can you promise me that Juno will be safe if people know he's yours?" The question hung heavy between them, and she watched Tamien's jaw clench as he struggled with an answer they both knew he couldn't give. Tamien turned to face her, and in the dim light, he looked every bit the powerful man he was, but also achingly vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "4 years ago, you were right to run. I was in the middle of a war I didn't fully understand, and Mr. Choi's betrayal nearly destroyed everything I'd built." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch setting her skin on fire despite the cool night air. "But I've changed things, Katie. I've consolidated power, eliminated threats, built something more stable. I can't promise you a normal life. I'll never be a normal man, but I can promise you this. Anyone who tries to touch you or our son will have to go through me, and I've become very good at protecting what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her, but instead, it made her feel safe for the first time in years. "Are we yours?" she asked softly, her heart in her throat. Tamien's eyes darkened with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You never stopped being mine, Katie. Not for a single day." Then his lips were on hers, and 4 years of longing, pain, and desperate love crashed over them like a wave they'd been holding back for too long. Their connection is undeniable, but someone has been watching from the shadows. Katie's return hasn't gone unnoticed, and the past is about to come knocking in the most dangerous way. Katie woke up wrapped in Tamien's arms on the hotel couch, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a sound she'd dreamed about for 4 years. They'd talked until dawn about everything: Juno's favorite foods, his laugh, the way he asked a million questions about everything. Tamien had cried when she showed him videos on her phone, birthdays, first days of preschool, all the moments he'd missed. "I'll never forgive myself for not finding you sooner," he'd whispered against her hair. "I should have looked harder." Now, in the soft morning light, Katie felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Maybe they really could be a family. Maybe the danger had passed, and they could build something beautiful from the ashes of their broken past. But that hope shattered the moment Tamien's phone buzzed with an urgent message. She felt his body tense, felt the way his arms tightened around her protectively, and her stomach dropped. "What is it?" she asked, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. Tamien sat up slowly, his face transformed from the tender lover of moments ago into the hard, calculating man who'd survived in a world of shadows and secrets. "Mr. Choi," he said, his voice like ice. "He's been released from prison. Got out 3 days ago on some technicality." Katie's blood turned cold, and her hand instinctively reached for the bedroom where Juno slept peacefully, unaware that the man who'd warned her mother away 4 years ago was now free. "Tamien, he knows about me. He knows I overheard everything that night. If he finds out I'm here, if he finds out about Juno..." Her voice rose with panic, but Tamien pulled her close, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his tone commanding but gentle. "Choi spent 4 years in prison because of me. He has every reason to want revenge, and you're right, if he knows you're here, he'll use you to get to me." He pulled out his phone, already typing rapid commands. "I'm moving you and Juno to my penthouse within the hour. My security there is impenetrable. And Katie..." His eyes burned into hers with fierce determination. "This time you don't run. This time, we face the danger together, as a family. Protection comes with a price. Katie must now enter Taemin's world completely. But is his penthouse a sanctuary or a beautiful cage? And what does Mr. Choi really want? Taemin's penthouse was like stepping into another universe. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking all of Seoul, marble floors, and art that probably cost more than Katie had earned in her entire life. But what struck her most was how Taemin transformed the moment they arrived, his staff appearing like shadows to accommodate their every need. Within an hour, one of the spare bedrooms had been converted into a child's paradise for Juno, complete with toys, books, and even a little bed shaped like a race car. "You did all this in an hour?" Katie whispered, watching Juno squeal with delight as he explored his new room. Taemin stood close behind her, his hand settling on her waist in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. "I'd build him a kingdom if he asked," he murmured against her ear. "I have 4 years to make up for, and I intend to give him everything." The words were sweet, but they also reminded Katie of the vast difference between their worlds. He could make miracles happen with a phone call, while she'd been clipping coupons and working double shifts to give Juno a good life. Later that evening, after Juno had fallen asleep exhausted from excitement, Katie found Taemin in his study, surrounded by computer screens showing security footage from around the city. The sight sent a chill down her spine. This was his reality, always watching, always calculating, always one step ahead of danger. "Hey," she said softly from the doorway, and he turned, his hard expression melting the moment he saw her. He held out his hand, and she went to him, letting him pull her onto his lap in the large leather chair. "I'm scared," she admitted, her fingers playing with the collar of his shirt. "Not just of Choi, but of this. Of getting used to this life, and then losing it. Losing you again." Taemin tilted her chin up, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "For years ago, I let you slip away because I didn't fight hard enough, didn't make you believe you were more important than anything else in my world," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't make that mistake again, Katie. You and Juno, you're not just in my world now. You are my world." Then he kissed her with a desperation that spoke of all the lonely nights, all the what-ifs, all the love that had never died. But neither of them noticed the security alert flashing on one of the screens behind them. Someone was asking questions about Katie at her mother's hospital. Danger is closer than they think, and Mr. Choi is making his move. But the real threat might come from someone they never suspected. Katie's phone rang at midnight, the hospital's number flashing on the screen, and her heart plummeted. "Mom," she whispered, already knowing, and Taemin was beside her instantly, his hand on her back as she answered with shaking fingers. But it wasn't the doctor. It was her mother's nurse, Mrs. Park, her voice urgent and frightened. "Miss Katie, you need to know. A man came asking questions about you today. He said he was an old friend, but your mother got very agitated when she saw him. She kept saying, 'Tell Katie to run, tell her to take Juno and run.'" Katie's blood turned to ice. "What did he look like?" she asked, gripping Taemin's hand so tight her nails dug into his skin. Mrs. Park's description confirmed her worst fear. Mr. Choi had found her mother, which meant he knew exactly where Katie was and why she'd returned. Taemin was already on his phone before Katie could even process the information, barking orders to his security team, but the real gut punch came when Mrs. Park added, "There's something else." He wasn't alone. He was with someone from inside Mr. Taemin's organization. I heard them mention Minjun's name. The phone slipped from Katie's hand as she stared at Taemin, watching his face transform from concern to cold fury as he processed what they'd just learned. Minjun, his trusted assistant, his right hand for over 6 years, was working with Choi. "Get Juno," Taemin said quietly, too quietly, the kind of calm that came before a devastating storm. "Pack a bag. We're leaving in 5 minutes." But Katie grabbed his arm, seeing the dangerous look in his eyes. The look of a man about to do something he couldn't take back. "Taemin, wait. If Minjun's been feeding Choi information, he knows everything. He knows about Juno, he knows this penthouse's security system, he knows." Her voice broke as the full weight of the betrayal hit her. They weren't just in danger, they'd been compromised from the inside. Taemin pulled her close, his jaw clenched against her hair. "I know," he said, and there was something in his voice that scared her, a darkness she'd never heard before. "Which is why I need you to trust me one more time, Katie. Trust me to handle this my way." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes fierce and protective. "Minjun made a mistake. He thought my feelings for you made me weak. He's about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Taemin is about to show the ruthless side Katie has never seen." But as they prepare to confront Minjun, a shocking discovery about Juno will change everything they thought they knew. Katie was packing Juno's clothes with trembling hands when her phone rang again. Her mother's personal number this time. She answered on speaker so Tameen could hear, and what her mother said next made the entire world tilt on its axis. "Katie, baby, I don't have much time left, and I need to tell you the truth before I go." Her mother's weak voice came through, labored with pain and urgency. 4 years ago, when you came to me pregnant and terrified, I made a choice. I contacted Mr. Choi myself and made a deal with him. Katie's knees buckled and Tameen caught her, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Mom, what are you saying?" Katie whispered, her voice breaking. Her mother's sob echoed through the phone. "Choi wasn't working against Tameen, baby. He was working for him, a deep cover operation to root out the real traitors in the organization. But I didn't know that. I thought I was saving you by helping Choi gather evidence faster, so you could disappear before everything exploded. I'm the one who told him about your pregnancy. I'm the reason he knew to warn you away." The confession hung in the air like poison, and Katie felt like she couldn't breathe. Everything she thought she knew, every reason she'd had for running, was built on her mother's well-intentioned meddling and misunderstandings. "But that's not the worst of it," her mother continued, her voice fading. "Last week, Choi came to see me. He said he got out of prison because new evidence proved he was working for Tameen all along, that his cover was finally blown and his sacrifice recognized. He came to apologize to me, Katie. He said if he'd known I didn't understand the real situation, he would have explained it better. He said he never meant for you to run." Katie looked up at Tameen, saw the muscle ticking in his jaw as he processed this information, saw the way his hands were shaking with barely controlled emotion. "So Choi isn't the threat?" Katie asked, her world spinning. Her mother's next words stopped her heart. "No, baby. The real threat is the person who put Choi in prison in the first place. The person who's been waiting for years for you to come back so they could finish what they started. Min-jun isn't working with Choi. He's the one Choi was investigating. And sweetheart, he just walked into the penthouse. The enemy has been inside all along, and now he's in the penthouse with them. Katie, Tameen, and Juno are trapped with a man who has nothing left to lose." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Katie's blood run cold, and Tameen moved with deadly precision, positioning himself between his family and the door while pulling Katie and a sleepy Juno behind him. Min-jun appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, and the man Katie had seen earlier that day, polite, efficient, forgettable, was gone, replaced by someone with cold eyes and a gun held loosely at his side. "I have to admit, I'm impressed you figured it out so quickly," Min-jun said casually, as if they were discussing the weather and not a 4-year conspiracy. "I thought I had at least until morning before Mrs. Park's loose lips reached you." Tameen's voice was deadly calm, the voice of a man who'd faced down danger 100 times before. "You've worked for me for 6 years, Min-jun. I trusted you with everything." "Why?" Min-jun laughed bitterly, and Katie held Juno closer as the little boy began to whimper, sensing the danger even in his half-asleep state. "Because you were supposed to fall, not rise. When Choi started investigating, I was supposed to pin everything on you and take over your empire. But then she happened," he gestured at Katie with disgust, "and you started talking about going legitimate, about leaving the life for love. You became weak." Katie felt Tameen tense like a coiled spring, but his voice remained eerily controlled. "So you're the one who leaked information about Katie to my enemies 4 years ago. You're the reason she ran." Min-jun smirked. "I'm the reason she should have died, but she was smarter than I expected. When she disappeared, I thought I'd lost my leverage. Then Choi went to prison for my crimes, and I had time to rebuild my position, waiting for the day you'd find her again." He raised the gun slightly, and Katie's heart stopped. "But now she's back with your bastard son, and I realize I don't need to destroy you slowly anymore. I can take everything from you in one night and watch you break the way you should have broken years ago." Juno was crying now, and Katie's mind raced for a way out, but they were trapped. 3 flights up with Min-jun blocking the only exit. Then Tameen did something that shocked everyone. He stepped forward, away from Katie and Juno, his hands raised. "You want revenge? Take it. But let them go first. They walk out that door, and then you and I settle this the way it should have been settled years ago." His eyes met Katie's, and in them she saw love, desperation, and goodbye. "No," Katie whispered, tears streaming down her face because she understood what he was doing. He was sacrificing himself to save them, and she couldn't lose him again, not now, not when they'd just found their way back to each other. Tameen is willing to give up everything for his family, but Katie has hidden strength he's never seen. The final confrontation will test them all, and not everyone will make it out unscathed. What happened next, Katie would remember for the rest of her life in fragments. Tameen lunging forward to tackle Min-jun, the gun going off with a deafening crack that made Juno scream, and her own voice crying out Tamin's name in anguish. But then the penthouse door exploded inward, and suddenly the room was flooded with men in tactical gear, and standing at the front was Mr. Choi himself, older and grayer than Katie remembered, his own weapon trained on Min-jun, who lay pinned beneath Tamin's weight. "It's over, Min-jun," Choi said quietly, almost sadly, as his team secured the scene. "I've been watching you since the day I got out, waiting for you to make your move." Every word you just said was recorded. Katie collapsed to her knees, pulling Juno into her arms as Tamin slowly stood, a red stain spreading across his shoulder where the bullet had grazed him, but alive, thank God, alive. Later, after Min-jun was taken away and the penthouse was secured, after Juno had finally cried himself to sleep and the medics had bandaged Tamin's wound, Katie and Tamin stood on the balcony watching the sun rise over Seoul. "My mother called again," Katie said softly, her hand in his. "She wants to meet you before it's time." Tamin nodded, pulling her close despite the pain in his shoulder. "We'll go today. As a family." The word family hung between them, beautiful and terrifying and full of promise. "So what happens now?" Katie asked, looking up at the man she'd never stopped loving. "Now I do what I should have done 4 years ago," Tamin said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box that made Katie's heart stop. "I choose you. I choose Juno. I choose the life I want, not the one I was born into." He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, perfect. "Marry me, Katie. Let me spend the rest of my life making up for the years we lost, being the father Juno deserves, the man you need me to be." Katie's tears fell freely as she nodded, and when he slipped the ring onto her finger, she felt like maybe, finally, they could have their happy ending. But as they kissed in the golden morning light, neither of them noticed the black car parked across the street, or the figure inside taking photographs. A figure with a face they both knew, Tamin's father, the man who'd built the empire Tamin now controlled, the man everyone believed had died 2 years ago in a car accident. He lowered his camera with a cold smile, watching his son embrace the woman and child he'd traveled halfway around the world to eliminate. "So my son thinks he can leave the family business for love?" he murmured to himself, starting the engine. "Let's see how much he's willing to sacrifice when he learns I'm alive, and I've come to collect what's mine." Oh my God, did you see that ending? Tamin's father is alive and coming for them. What do you think will happen next? Will Katie and Tamin's love survive this new threat? Drop your theories in the comments below. And if you want part 2 of this story, smash that like button, share this video, and subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss what happens when Tamin's father makes his move. Should Katie run again, or should she stay and fight? Tell me what you think should happen next. See you in part 2. If we get enough likes.